Hey everyone, my name is Matt Johnson. I work as a web developer for ExpressionEngine /PacketTide /EE Harbor. I wanted to welcome you to my talk, Secure Your Site with ExpressionEngine. I'm excited to be talking about security today because it's something that I'm passionate about and I think it's a very interesting and important topic. Did you know that according to cybersecurity experts, damage related to cybercrime is projected to hit $6 trillion annually by 2021? Which is a pretty crazy figure if you think about it. Data breaches and other cybercrime-related incidents put your business, your reputation, your customers, and your partners at risk. As a developer, you have a responsibility to implement best practices and to configure sites in a way that maximizes the security of your clients. The goal of this talk is to provide a firm understanding of cybersecurity in the context of an ExpressionEngine site, as well as practical examples of improving the sites you manage. I'm going to go through a few common attack vectors, and then we're going to look at a poorly built ExpressionEngine site and fix the issues with it. Now we're going to talk about a few basic things you can do to enhance the overall security of your site. Update regularly. Keeping your installation up to date is the easiest way to keep your site secure. ExpressionEngine's security measures are routinely updated to stay ahead of the ever-evolving exploit landscape. Limit user permissions. You should only provide people with the minimum permissions they need to do what they need to do. In ExpressionEngine, that means that you shouldn't put everyone in the super admin member group. This also applies to your web server. Don't provide others with FTP or SSH access unless it's absolutely necessary. Periodically review your access settings and revoke any accounts and permissions that are no longer required. Use Ssl Certificates. This one's easier and easier as Ssl Certificates can be obtained for free, but this is really important to apply to your site and restrict all traffic to HTTPS. This can help prevent password sniffing on insecure networks such as public Wi-Fi hotspots. Create a password policy. ExpressionEngine's password requirements are customizable. We recommend implementing a reasonable policy. Require a minimum password length of at least 8 characters. Require secure passwords that include at least one lowercase and one uppercase letter and one number. And also enable password lockouts. Restrict file types. When setting up a file upload directory, you should restrict it as much as you're able to. If you only expect images to be uploaded, only allow images. Be as strict as you can initially, and then loosen up requirements on a case-by-case basis. Remove unused add-ons and applications. Oftentimes, legacy applications running alongside your site are the weakest link in your install. If the code is rarely used or is never used, just remove it altogether. For features that are still being used, ask yourself if it's worth a potential security incident or a data breach. A lot of clients don't want to pay for work that removes functionality or cleans up security issues in code that technically works otherwise. And while it's tempting to leave it alone, it's only a matter of time before the wrong person notices the insecure part of your site. Remember, add-ons and applications run as the same permission level as your web server and as the ExpressionEngine core, which is higher than superadmin. When you see the acronym CIA, most of you probably think of the United States Central Intelligence Agency. But in the context of security, the CIA triad is actually a security model that has been developed to help people think about various parts of IT security. CIA is an acronym that stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Almost all cybersecurity incidents involve disrupting one or more of these, and most security policies are based on this model. Confidentiality ensures that sensitive information is accessed only by authorized people. Typically, this is done by using security mechanisms such as usernames, passwords, access control lists, and encryption. One common practice is to sort data based on how much damage could be done if it fell into the wrong hands. Confidentiality can be compromised on the web when sensitive data or files are accessed by people who shouldn't have access to them. Integrity ensures that information doesn't change from its original purposes and remains accurate and complete through its entire life cycle. Information should only be modified by authorized people and should remain in its original state when at rest. Various attacks that compromise data integrity include a man-in-the-middle attack, breaking into a web server, and introducing malicious code in databases. Availability simply means that information and resources are available to those who need them. If your server goes down, what do? A typical attack against the availability of a system is a denial of service attack. Depending on the severity and importance of the site or system, it's a good idea to implement redundancy. Redundancy ensures fault tolerance and is often implemented on the web with load balancing servers. So I wanted to start getting into the application side of things. So I'm going to quickly run through our demo site. Let's see. Okay, so welcome to the Fix Me site. I've purposely configured this site all wrong, and throughout the talk, I'm going to walk through a bunch of settings and issues we have with the site, and we'll fix them all. But we got a basic site, homepage, some content. We've got our About page, products, store, and this is just ours. And then there's a simple contact form. And then we also have a hours page, which is employees only. So obviously that's super secure. And I'm going to do name equals Joe. And so this is where Joe can go to check his hours. It gets updated every week, hopefully. And super secure. Nothing's really high confidentiality, but this way it's a little bit private. So I wanted to start by talking about how to harden a default ExpressionEngine install. First of all, ExpressionEngine takes security issues very seriously. On a fresh install, ExpressionEngine system files and directories are typically safe from direct HTTP access on a properly configured server. By default, most of the issues I'm going to talk about with the Fix Me site won't actually exist, but there are a few best practices you can follow right from the download link to increase your security. When you download ExpressionEngine, the system folder is in the web root. This is done intentionally since moving it above web root is not possible on some shared hosts. If this is the case, we recommend you rename the system folder as well as the admin file. The goal is to make it extremely hard for someone to guess your system path. So on the Fix Me site like this, we have our system folder is in the web root, which means when I hit index, I get my site. When I hit system, I can actually access these files. And something that's done in these files is it says if not defined base path, then exit. No direct script access allowed. So if you actually go to /system/user/config/config.php, you're going to get a message, no direct script access allowed. And that's by default. But it is a way that someone could possibly fingerprint you, or meaning they're trying to figure out what system you're running, what versions you're running. It is possible to go through here and learn information. An attacker can learn that you're running ExpressionEngine. If they can pull up, say, an EE2 file path, they have a better idea of what you're running. Or if they can access some add-on files, they can, again, get a better idea of what you're running and target you more directly that way. So what we're going to do is we've got our Fix Me site, and I'm going to change directory into public, and then I'm just going to move the system folder to, I don't know, QWERTY 1, 2, 3, 4. Don't guess. Okay, so obviously that's kind of silly, but just an example here. So now if someone goes to /system, they are not going to figure out, they're not going to see your site. So let's go to /system. Right, and that's actually because my system is loading the index file and it's saying, hey, your index file isn't set up right. And it's not, because we just changed the location of the system path. So now, next step, let's go into index.php and tell it that our system folder is QWERTY 1, 2, 3, 4. Don't guess. And the goal here is to make it as random long as possible, basically. So let's do that again in our admin. And let's see if we go back to our browser and refresh, and everything should work again. And let's just test if I go to admin. Wow, okay, admin.php. So that seems to work fine. And so we know we did it right. However, in most situations, you should actually be able to move the system folder above the web root without a problem. If you can't, then this is a good solution. But the problem with this is if I'm an attacker and I happen to know or can figure out somehow that your system folder is QWERTY 1, 2, 3, 4 / don't guess, which is a weird system folder. But let's just look at our code for a second. And we've got this weird folder, and then say we have, I don't know. Oh, let's target this current version. So I'm going to go back here, and we're going to do QWERTY 1, 2, 3, 4 don't guess / because that's our system folder / user / cache / current version. If I do this, I actually get a download, and this file right here, I'm gonna, well, when I open it, it's actually this file, which is pretty revealing. Now, again, this is only possible if they're able to guess your system folder. But by moving it above webroot, we're gonna make that not possible. And I should actually mention the other thing that you'll want to do is rename admin.php. So the next step is to move it above the web root. So I'm going to open up back to my terminal, and I'm just going to take this whole QWERTY and put it above the web root. So now if you go to this site directory, we have public, and that's where our web server is accessing. It's entering into the public directory. And then QWERTY 1, 2, 3, 4 don't guess. And that is not something that the web server will serve from. So now if I do that current version thing again, I'm not going to pull it up. And now if we refresh the page, we have an issue. But all we have to do is go back into our code and tell it to find the system folder one directory above in both our index and our admin files. So we're doing that. And once I go back to my browser, everything works. And so does system. And it's going to tell me that I've got core files that have been altered, and that's because the core files have been altered, and that was me. So I can accept that. But that's a warning. If it ever says that and it wasn't you, that's something that you should be concerned about. You should be looking into it and see what has actually changed. That should throw a red flag, though. One resource I want to talk about is the OWASP resource. And I've got that right here. OWASP stands for Open Web Application Security Project. They are a nonprofit that basically is out there trying to figure out security risks. And one thing they do is this OWASP Top 10, and they release it every few years. And basically they just analyze what are the top risks right now and write up the top 10, basically. They talk about them and what each of them does. So the first one we're going to see is injection. This is the top risk right now on sites. Now, if you're using ExpressionEngine, out of the box, there aren't injection flaws. And if you're using the ExpressionEngine helpers to write queries, again, they're using prepared statements, and you won't have flaws because it's going to sanitize your input. However, if you write queries from scratch and just run the query, you could have injection issues depending on how that goes. And we're going to come back to this a little bit, but I wanted to talk about injections first, SQL injections. So we've got this Fix Me site, and I've got this hours page up because that's of specific interest for injections, because I see that name equals Joe. First of all, it's right here. And then we've also got all of these based on that. So if I put in name equals Matt, well, there's nothing there. But if I put in, I don't know, name equals Matt, single quote. Okay, so this is how we know that we've got an issue with injections. If it fails like that, what it's doing is it's putting whatever I have right in the query. Select star from employee hours where name equals Matt. And I added this extra single quote, which messed up the query. So we know already that we're going to be able to exploit this. And based on this query, you could exploit it pretty far. You could do probably almost anything in the database with it. So let's see. Let's go back to name equals Matt. And I'm going to pull up the code here so we can take a look. And this is kind of cheating, but you don't need to look at the code. There are a lot of tools that can do this. Also, it looks like the error messages are just completely on right now. So, I mean, that helps. But let's take a look at the code. I've got this template up. We've got our hours template group with the index file. This is one way to build a site. Maybe not the best way, but this was a quick demo. So we've got get name, and that's a PHP variable. And so we're storing the get name variable. When we go back to the browser, you're going to see that is this. This is your get variable. So by putting name equals Matt, essentially what we're doing is we're saying select star from employee hours where name equals Matt. So I can type in anything. If I put in another single quote like this, now we've got a query that has bad syntax. So let's undo that, but I'm going to take this query and I'm just going to put it down here. And we're going to take a look at what we can do. So if I put something else in here, so say I put Matt, and then I need to, if I put more stuff, so Matt, and I want to like, say I want to break the query and say, or 1 equals 1. Wow. Well, this is going to evaluate as name equals Matt or 1 equals 1. And so instead, we're going to terminate that single quote. And now we have a SQL query that says where name equals Matt or where 1 equals 1. And then to make this single quote on the other side just kind of go away, we're going to do a comment. And that's a comment. Wow, comment. So now I'm going to take this, starting with Matt, because this is what's going in our two single quotes. And I'm going to just take it and put it in here and see if that works. Let's try running it. Oh, I didn't have the web browser up. Okay, let's do that again. All right, so I'm going to take that query, put it in here, and we're going to run it. And first we have our query written at the top, what we entered. And then we have some interesting data. Basically, we're dumping out the whole contents of that table, because what it's doing is it's saying this row here, where the name is admin, that 1 equals 1 means it's true. So let's print out that one. And this one also evaluates to true because everything evaluates to true. So it's basically going to loop through every single row, and we've only got 3, but it's going to print them all out. And you might say, okay, so Joe can now see John's hours, like who cares? Or like even if the public can see their hours, sure, it's not the end of the world, but from here, and I'm not going to go deep into this, but from here you are able to select data from the sites table, or I can select data from the members table, the EXP members table, or I could, basically this one flaw allows me to pivot anywhere on the database. And we're going to talk a little bit about the CIA again and how this ties back into that, but we can evaluate this as being C, I, and A. So confidentiality, I'm able to pull basically anything I want from the database, as I don't even have to be logged in to do that. So that's a real problem. The I aspect of that, the integrity, I could form a query that did an update or an insert, and so I could go in and change someone else's data with this. So again, that's a pretty serious problem. That hits our C, I, and then our A for availability, because if I could change certain data in the database, I could potentially take the site down. I could remove pages that users need to get access to. Availability is really a lot of things, but it's saying that when the members of your site or the users of your site need access to it, they can get access to it. So if there's an injection vulnerability in your site, it basically throws all of that out. So we're going to look at how you fix that. So first of all, this is bad. Looping through and just printing everything in the database, obviously that's bad. But we could sanitize this data and then run it, and it would actually not run our query, because it would remove anything like the comments and things like that I tried to insert before. So let's try that first. So the fastest way to get rid of this is to escape our string. So we're getting the name, but we're not processing that at all. And as a general rule of thumb, if you're ever getting data from a user, just assume it's bad. Most users aren't going to do this or like provide bad data, but someone will. So you can never trust the users. And so what we're going to do is just use a built-in ExpressionEngine function. We'll do db, what is it? I believe it's just escape string. Escape string a name. So now that name equals our escaped string version of name, what it's going to put in here is sanitized with our database escape function. And this function is made to escape anything that you throw at it, basically. So let's pull up the web browser again. And let's try to run name equals Matt single quote again, like we did before. And this time it doesn't crash, it doesn't break things. And that is how we know that it's fixed. I don't think, well, I know none of these, we've got this one, none of these will run anymore. So while this does escape the database string, I'd like to talk about how to make this just a little bit better. First of all, we really shouldn't have PHP in our templates. So let's do that first. I've added this add-on fix me. Just added an add-on .setup and a plugin. So we've got fix me and employee hours. And so in our template, that's going to look, let's put it in here. That's going to look like this. And then, oops, like that. And then we'll be able to do something like name. So that's our first step. So let's just take all of this out, all of our PHP. And I'm just going to get rid of all of it. And this one right here, if you hadn't noticed, this is actually a cross-site scripting vulnerability. We're just going to take it out. And then as for our code, let's remove it and put it into our plugin. So first thing I want to talk about is this get. This is a bad way to get data. There's other things that can come in. So we're specifically escaping a database string, but like I showed before, we actually still would have a cross-site scripting vulnerability, and this isn't going to clean all of that. Just database string escapes. So first thing I would do is I'm going to use EE's input helper and get name. And if we pass true to our second parameter, it's going to actually clean that data, the cross-site scripting clean. So now this is something we could do. I'm going to actually change this database name to EXP employee hours. And so this is going to be case by case based on what you're doing. But now that we're integrating this into the core, I'm going to go with the standard, what we're used to. And while we're at it, let's just replace this entirely with a prepared statement. So I'm going to select star from employee hours, where name equals name. And then we're going to get it. And I'm going to actually get it into a result array for now. And this is just so it's easier for us to parse into the template parser. So next, let's see. Let's put this in the template parser, and we're going to parse our hours into our tag data. And let's see if we get a name here. And I have to pull up the browser. Okay, so I'm going to do equals Joe. Okay, so we get a name. Let's go back to our template code. I'm going to put in Monday and let's just see if that parses. Okay, so we're getting data here. Now I'm going to add that HTML around our data. So let's clean this up just a little bit. Doesn't have to be perfect, but here's our days and our name. And let's go back to our browser. And it looks like now we're able to put in name equals Joe, and it'll print out our data. And this is actually a much better way of doing it. We're protecting against our vulnerability. We're also only showing one person's employee hours. So let me go back, and we're going to improve it just a little bit more. Actually, you might see this. I put name equals segment 2. So when I go into here, into our add-on code, instead of using that get parameter, I'm actually going to use a parameter on the add-on. And let's just call this name. And now we're able to go back to our browser, and we have this issue, and this is another thing you can code for, and I'm actually not going to do that right now, but you can look into how to do that. But now we're going to do segment 2 is Joe, and now we got that, and that is also a little cleaner. We're not using get parameters. ExpressionEngine is automatically going to clean this data, and then in our code it's also a little more clean. Now we have our template, and it is free of PHP code. And that actually allows us to go into the control panel and disable PHP for that template. So I'm going to go in there and do that now. This is my template. I'm going to click this settings cog right there and disable the allow PHP toggle. And up here, there's a little warning that says allowing PHP and templates has security implications. And any setting marked with this, you should look into what it's doing and why it's a problem. So I'm going to just save it like this. And really the problem with the PHP and templates is that you're allowing anyone with template access to write any PHP that they want, which is basically direct file system access, direct database access, and that's not usually what's intended. So by removing PHP in our templates, it really cleans up our code and gives us a more secure site and less options for any bad actors to get in there and do anything. Let's go back to the ExpressionEngine control panel now. And you can see that we have this warning across the top. And this is big and obnoxious on purpose. Obviously, the encryption keys being used to encrypt your data are stored in your config file. And when you create an ExpressionEngine site, they are generated, and they should always be different for every site. If you're someone who copies a default config every single time, you might want to rethink that and leave that config item empty. That way you get this error and you're able to regenerate it. So if I have encrypted things in the database right now, what I'm going to want to do is take that encryption key and find it in a backup and put it back in there. But if that's not an option and I don't have one, all we have to do is simply generate one. And if you look at the docs, it's pretty easy to do. You can do it in several different ways. And I believe there's also a security helper. You can do like EE security generate key. So let's just do this one. I'm going to pull up my terminal, and we're just going to run OpenSSL. And we've got a key here, and I'm actually going to run it again. And you can see that every time I run it, I'm going to get a different key. And this is supposed to be a highly random number. So let me take these keys, and I'm going to use 2 of them. And obviously, now that everyone has seen these 2 keys, that's not something you'd want to use. Same with the keys in the docs. Never use these keys. But we're going to go into the code now. Let's open up our config file. and I'm just going to add these 2 keys. Let's just put them here. That's fine, actually. So we've got our keys now. I'm going to go back into our control panel, and let's refresh, and it looks like it doesn't have a problem with that. So the takeaway there is you always want to have keys, and you always want them different. Don't make them the same. You don't want 2 keys for encryption and session that are the same, and you also don't want to duplicate these keys on multiple sites. Let's talk about cross-site request forgeries. You probably know it as CSRF. You've probably seen it around. Most of you probably even know what it is, but basically it's an attack that forces a user to execute some kind of unwanted actions in a web application that they're currently authenticated on. So a classic example would be visiting evilsite.com, which in turn fires off a form submission to mysite.com or twitter.com or whatever to change my password. So if cross-site request forgery protections were not in place, you actually could be at risk when visiting a malicious site like this or clicking a link, and it actually would change your password or add a user, a member, or change, the possibilities are really endless. Anything you could do in a form, they could do in a form. And this is why CSRF protections are in place in the first place. So basically what is done is there's a token, and the web application generates that token. And when you submit a form, if that token's not present, it knows it didn't actually originate from you. So by default, ExpressionEngine implements these protections on every form, any login, basically anything. So this isn't typically an issue on an ExpressionEngine site, but I do occasionally run into them when working on an upgrade, or I have seen it more often than I'd like. And I think that is because people are actively disabling this protection feature. And basically what it comes down to is they probably made a form and the form wasn't working. They got an ExpressionEngine error, and someone in some post somewhere said, hey, if you just disable this, it's going to work. And lo and behold, they do that and it does work. Which, yeah, it is. It's going to make that work, but that was your protection. That's not the right answer. So we're going to go through just an example on the Fix Me site that actually is doing that currently. So if I go to my contact page and get in touch, I'm going to give it my info and let's say great site. And I'm going to submit it. And that works fine. And we get a little thank you. We appreciate your feedback message with my name in there, which is fishy because I gave it to it. But we'll look into that later. So let's see how that template is actually built. Okay, so we've got our form. It submits with post to contact, and that's the same page it's on. And if you look at this, you'll see an input for name, input for email, an input for my message, well, a text area, and then my submit button. And you don't actually see a token anywhere. So that's what makes me immediately think, okay, so there's no token on this form. Did they disable the protection features? So I'm going to open up my config file and just see what we've got. So get our config. And sure enough, right here, we've got disable CSRF protection equals true. And this is a bad idea. You'd be surprised, though, how many people actually do this, how many sites I've seen that they're disabling the protection just because it's easier. And maybe some of you have done this. Who knows? But now you'll know not to do this. So I'm going to take it out, and we're going to see what happens to our form when we submit it. So let's go back to the browser, and I'm on the contact page, and I'm going to resubmit a form, and let's just see what happens. Hi. Okay, so we've got this form has expired. Please refresh and try again. And if you think about it, this actually makes sense. tokens that the cross-site request forgery tokens actually do expire over time. It's designed so that when you land on that page and you are on a form, you've got so long to submit it, because it's basically so that hackers can't find an old token that is somehow tied to you and submit a form request. So it really does actually make a lot of sense. And so I'm going to go back and let's open up our code and see if we can fix that. So we know we have our form here, and all we need is that Csrf token. And so if I do Csrf token, and this is built into ExpressionEngine, it's designed to be easy to use, and refresh, and I believe this, so here's my token, and I have to put that into my form. And I've got it here. But just so you can see, that is what the, oh, I didn't go to the browser. This is what the token looks like. Just print it out right on the page. But I want it to be in my form. So there it is. It's a hidden input. And if you use the form helpers, it will actually generate this for you. But we're not going to do that right now. You can look that up in the docs. It's probably a better way in general to build your forms, but we're just going to fix this form and move on. So let's go back to our page, refresh. I'm just going to take a look at the code here. Oh, I don't have the browser open again. Wow. Okay, so after refreshing, I opened up the code here and I'm looking at the form, and now we have our hidden Csrf token with a value of this thing. And that's what ExpressionEngine generated. And if you submit a form request from my browser, the only way it will work is if it includes this right here. So I'm going to do exactly that. Let's do another request, and I'll just say, I don't know, I'll just do this. Submit it. And we can see that now it works again, and we were able to enable our Csrf protections. So overall, not a hard fix, but it goes really far in adding security to the forms on your sites. If you were previously using that setting in your config, go ahead and take the time to reevaluate and to update your forms. One other thing I forgot to mention while I was in that config file, let's open that back up. We've got this secure forms here, and that equals no. But secure forms is basically an old setting. I think it's from the EE2 days, and that's the same as the Csrf protection disable. So we're going to take that out as well. I don't believe that's actually doing anything right now, but it's confusing and it's not what we're going for, so I'm just going to remove it. While we're in the config, I'm going to actually touch on this debug setting right here. We've got debug equals 2, and that's not really a problem when I'm developing locally here, but if I forget that and I push it up to a live site, we're going to have some real issues. Basically what that's doing is it's saying to show all my debug errors to anyone. So you don't have to be logged in to see it. If you set it to 1, this means you have to be a super admin to see your debug errors. And that setting is okay. You can also set it to 0 if you have clients logging in that don't want to see things, or for whatever reason. I actually recommend 1 so that if you are logged in as a super admin, you're able to see those errors, but almost no one should have that access in the first place. The last big web vulnerability I wanted to talk about today is cross-site scripting. Cross-site scripting is actually a very broad topic, and there are several types of cross-site scripting, and the specifics of the scenario are going to determine the severity. In short, XSS is a form of JavaScript injection. The two main forms of XSS attacks are reflected and stored. A reflected XSS attack is a non-persistent form, most commonly in HTTP query parameters. A classic example is a search form that immediately prints out the search term to the page. If the response does not properly escape or reject HTML control characters, an attacker can inject JavaScript to the page and potentially run their JavaScript on another user's browser, circumventing same origin policy and breaking basic browser level web security. Stored cross-site scripting is a persistent form of cross-site scripting and is typically more devastating. This occurs when the injected JavaScript code is saved into the application, usually the database. If the data isn't sanitized on output, an attacker can write JavaScript that will run when someone visits a page. Since the JavaScript originates from the user's DOM, it has the potential to cause a lot of harm. A classic example of cross-site scripting is the comment section. If there was a XSS, you could write JavaScript that would execute in the browser of everyone who visited that page and saw that comment. Here's a hilarious example of an attack being executed over a Twitch live stream.
So, let me put it this way. You guys found a vulnerability in the chat client that... Don't mind me. Oh my goodness! I'm just gonna sit back and sip my tea and you realize you rolled yourself, right? You loaded my actual Twitch channel. Somehow. I don't particularly know how you did it.
So that video is actually 14 minutes long, and I can leave a link, but it's pretty funny, but this can be pretty serious as well. You saw that someone was trying to load his his Twitch account or something, and that easily could turn into something more revealing than he wanted. Let's go back to our Fix Me site and see if we can find a cross-site scripting vulnerability. All right, so I'm going to load up the contact page because that's what we noted before is where we can send data and it goes to the screen. And let's just recap that. If I submit this form, I get my name printed to the screen here. And this could be sanitized, but let's just check. So if I run script alert econf 2020, oh right, closing script tag, and I submit that, right, I need an email, then we can verify, yes, my JavaScript code did run. This is not supposed to run. It's not part of the website. And this is potentially an issue because we could get to a situation where someone else goes to that page and my code runs. So we're just going to take a look into the code right now and see if there's something we can do to fix that. And immediately, you'll probably notice we're just using the post variables here. So if is set post name, then we're going to show that little we appreciate your feedback, and then print out the name. And already this is definitely our problem, and I'm going to do let's use EE's input again. EE input post name. All right, let's go back and see if that fixed it. And it looks like it did not fix it. And there's a reason for that. If you look at this, this is just a helper. This is just a helper to get that post. But I did mention this earlier. If I pass true as the second parameter, this is going to run it through EE security function cross-site scripting clean, XSS clean. And it should sanitize all of the HTML. So let's try that again now. Let's do econf, email, message, submit. And it looks like it actually did sanitize it. So we're seeing this removed data here. And this is ExpressionEngine's way of sanitizing it. So this is definitely one option that we could do. I mean, we know that no one should be putting in script tags. And this is actually a pretty good option here. Another option we could do is to move this into an add-on. And I showed how to do that earlier. I don't think I'm going to, but essentially you could get this, and I didn't actually run anything when we get that submission. So normally you'd see something like this, like if is set post name, and then I don't know, send an email or save it to the database or something like that. And in this example, this is just not being run. But we would like to move that code normally to an add-on. So I did just want to loop back to this and just point out this is a bad way of doing a contact form. ExpressionEngine has a built-in email contact form. You could do channel forms. You could support an add-on developer and buy something like Freeform or Forms, but all of these will work, and they have the security that you're looking for built in. The EE input post XSS clean I demonstrated is kind of if you're in a pinch and you've got something that's been there and it's legacy and you need to make sure that it doesn't have vulnerabilities. That is a way you can get your post data and clean it and not have to worry about it. But if you're making a new contact form, obviously there's way better ways of doing it. All right, well, that's all we have time for. Thanks for listening to my talk. I'll be around to answer some questions, but feel free to ping me either in chat or in Slack. My intention was to cover some of the most common issues I see and to provide resources, but if I missed anything big that you would have included, please feel free to put it in chat, and hopefully someone else can benefit from that as well.
So that was a very interesting and eye-opening presentation there. Hopefully everybody learned a little something about security. We got a couple questions that happened kind of further back in the presentation that we'll kind of jump back to, and then we'll take any newer questions. So one of them was, is there a simple way to rotate the encryption key without breaking encrypted data in the database?
And there's really not. Basically, you'd have to decrypt all your data using that encryption key, replace it, and re-encrypt your data. So right now, there's not really a simple way of doing that. It might be worth the EE team to look into maybe providing something along those lines if that's something people would use. But yeah, it'd have to be some sort of batch thing right now. So
there's another question. I think this relates to when you were talking about you were doing the example with the get global object or get global array, and then switching that to use the service. Is there a benefit to doing this versus using the query module?
Yeah, and in my example, there's you definitely could have used the query module. I tend to try to stay away from the query module in general, but it definitely has its place. I think in my example, I was just trying to demonstrate how you could pull PHP code into an add-on, and if it did any more processing on the data, that would definitely be the way to go. And usually what I've seen, at least, it's not just getting something out of the database and printing it. It's like processing the data or filtering something. So usually the go-to is an add-on.
Okay. I got a new question from Benoit. I hope I said that right. I'm sorry if I didn't. Is there a way to encrypt sensitive data in the database, or is that not necessary?
Yeah. So the ExpressionEngine has built-in functions that you can use to encrypt data. A lot of add-ons are using this to encrypt anything that's secure, that needs to be secure. But I believe it's just like EE security encrypt. I don't know. It is in the docs, and then you do decrypt to decrypt that data when you're getting it. And that's actually one of the issues also I should have touched on with the other question. If you want to cycle keys, you'd have to know where all of your encrypted data is. So if you install a third-party add-on that is encrypting your data, you would also need to be able to decrypt that and know that that's there as well.
Yep. Look at the log. Don't see any new questions. Got a couple more minutes. If anybody has anything. Robin's asking any automated scripts you might recommend running to do a general check on your site.
I don't think I have any off the top of my head that I'd recommend for like ExpressionEngine sites. I guess in general, there definitely are some. I've used some browser plugins that will just like scan things. It'll like give you a notification and you can see if there's issues there. So I could post those. I don't know off the top of my head what they are, but
I want to actually add to that because we just ran a security check on the company I work for, Jamf, on our website, and ExpressionEngine came back with no security issues. We did find a security issue in our search module, which is view component. There was actually an XSS injection vulnerability. We weren't filtering script tag. So we patched that up pretty quick, but there are definitely third-party tools that focus on doing security scans of all different types. I don't remember the name of that off the top of my head, but I would recommend kind of looking into that.
Yep.
Screaming Frog's pretty cool. We use that as well. Okay, unless we got another question in the next few seconds, I guess we'll wrap that up. You can always ask Matt to jump over into one of the sessions, one of the lounges, if you got any further discussions or questions with him.
Yep. All right, well, thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Matt.